Now, let's get back to the schedule, and now it's time to go ahead for another book launching ceremony by none other than the very talented author Alexander Nolan. Please put your hands together for him.
Too many countries throughout his life and finally settled in India in 2012. He took to exploring the country on a motorcycle and began writing and blogging about his many experiences. In October of 2021, Lee released his debut crime thriller fiction novel, Blood and Brown. That's what I want to hear.
Blood and Brown Sugar is, on the surface, it's a crime thriller novel that deals primarily with all the things that a crime thriller should: murder, disgusting sex, a lot of drugs. But underneath it all, it's basically the story of a young man who's coming to grips with his reality. We find drugs from heroin, actually, through Pakistan, through Amritsar, down to Goa. And during this process, he sort of uncovers a deeper, darker side to himself. And as the layers begin to peel back, he starts to grapple with whether this is his true nature. And so it's not just him. There's several other sub-characters within the book that are facing their own dilemmas. So I guess at the heart of it all, the book is really about human nature and how we deal with our true nature and how we choose to present it to the world.
So a little bit out of the book context, what experience you have gained by traveling all these years, if you would like to share a few?
Well, I actually am a little bit relieved that our esteemed speakers aren't here. As I said, the book deals specifically with shipping and smuggling heroin, and while it might be eerily realistic, I wanted to show them it's absolutely fiction. I have traveled India extensively. There's only about 4 states that I haven't ridden through. My first 3 years within the country, I rode over 60,000 kilometers. And I don't mean highway riding, I mean I explored each and every state, back to front, top to bottom. From Kanyakumari to Kashmir, from Sikkim to Rajasthan, I've seen it all. Chances are I've ridden past your home at one point. And India itself has inspired me to I did some writing in the early 90s. I had some success in short stories and some university periodicals and things like that. And India re-inspired me to write. And I'd like to think that it's the diverse culture in India that I soaked up and the very lifeblood of the country that has given me the opportunity to express it now in written word.
Okay, so we are only glad about that. And what was your inspiration behind writing this book, this thriller?
It's interesting. The main hero, or the main protagonist, as I said, he's a bit of an anti-hero. And I'd always been fascinated with the anti-hero concept, the anti-hero character. Tyrion Lannister, for you Games of Thrones fans, is one of my favorites. Jack Sparrow, of course, Captain Jack, your favorite. So I've always been fascinated with that character. So I decided I wanted to write a novel based solely on an anti-hero. And as I started to write out the character profiles and even to begin the novel, unfortunately it turned out that my character just wasn't. His character profile just didn't. And I know those of you that write fiction know how frustrating it can be when you have a great strong character profile and you can't hammer him into the plot that you want to write. He just refuses to do what you want to do. So the book sort of stalled. And at the time, my wife and I were watching Breaking Bad on Netflix. And watching this transformation of Walter White into an evil man, metamorphosized into this evil man, I thought, that's it. What we're going to do is we're going to take a normal guy who's going to metamorphosize into an anti-hero. And once I sort of grappled that, I just let him loose on the page and he wrote the book himself.
So how did you come up with the book's title and theme?
Well, the theme basically is what I've just explained. I mean, the book does deal with a lot of dark things. There's some homosexuality, there's some bisexuality, there's murder, there's drugs, the corruption within the NCB. Narcotics Control Bureau. You know, I wouldn't expect that you'd ever been involved with them, so. But really, it was just a platform in order to tell this story about how this man evolved or devolved from hero to anti-hero. And India just seemed to be the right backdrop to do that, and it's heavily based on motorcycles. The heroine shipped through a motorcycle club from India to Montreal in Canada. And the name itself, Blood and Brown Sugar. Blood refers not only to the violence, but to the bond and the brotherhood that is felt within most motorcycle clubs. So that's in Blood Brothers. And well, brown sugar is heroin, so that's where that came from.
So is there any real life inspiration that you have taken for the characters?
I'd rather not answer that.
All right. So
of course, yes, there has been a lot of your personality bleeds through into your main character, no matter how much you try to keep him under wraps. And it just so happens that my main character is Canadian, and he's come to India. So a lot of what and the more astute of you might have noticed when I first sat down that he's not Indian. You're right. The cat's out of the bag. So a lot of my experiences, the first time I landed in Delhi and walked out of the airport and into India, when it hit me in the face for the first time, all the rides through some of the northern parts and some of the southern parts and through the deserts of Rajasthan, all those slants in the book are seen through a Canadian's eyes. So there's an awful lot of my experiences and my personal sort of takings away from India that have been included in the main character.
So apart from the protagonist itself, what was your favorite character in the book and why?
My favorite character? Oh man, I love Alex. I really do. He's probably the closest, but there's some that are rather close to my heart. Ramdev, he's the president of the Delhi chapter of the Iron Horses, which is the motorcycle club, and he's embroiled in his own struggles. Avinash Kumar is an aging agent within the NCB that's grasping for the brass ring before he retires, and Sita Chaudhary she's the sultry vixen. So I mean, they all have a special place in my heart.
Okay, so what kind of message did you want to convey in the book, and do you think you did a good job with it?
I did a wonderful job with it. I'm sure of that.
I'm sure too.
Yeah. I think the primary message, I think, as I said earlier, was how one grapples with their own inner demons and how, through no fault of your own, you can be set on a completely different path in life, and how you adapt and how you manage to that. While I was doing research for the book, a sub message emerged, and I found that while I was doing research that India is not so forthcoming with what I like to call ugly truths. It's very difficult to find out statistical figures on road fatalities per year, addiction, these sort of things. I'm not saying they're swept under the rug, but I don't think that they've been given the priority that they need to. I mean, there's a very serious heroin problem in India. There's a very serious heroin, and I uncovered that simply through my research. And I realized, that's not a bad message to get out there if through fiction I can expose a truth that maybe rallies the public around something as serious as heroin addiction, and that would be a good thing as well.
So I would like to tell you to read a few lines from the book, but before I do so, can I ask that since you're saying that it's about motorcycles and motorcycle club, and also the cover of the book, is this inspired from Sons of Anarchy?
It's funny you mention that. That's a wonderful question. I'm glad you asked it. When I used the writing program Scrivener, we're all familiar with it, or a lot of us would be. And Scrivener allows you to write detailed character profiles, including a picture. Now, I had not seen Sons of Anarchy when I began writing the book. However, for the main protagonist, for Alex, I randomly took a picture of a white biker off the internet, and it turned out to be Jack Steller. So I did start watching the series about midway through writing the book, and there are a lot of similarities, but only insofar as, how to say delicately, I'm very familiar with the inner workings of 1% motorcycle clubs, outlaw motorcycle clubs. And so insofar as the Iron Horses, the fictitious club, and again, Sons of Anarchy were based on the Hells Angels in the States. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. But it's a completely different story, completely different characters, completely different outcome.
Yeah, it's just the cover of the book. So can you please, can you read some lines from the book?
Getting old. This particular passage is while Alex is writing. They've got the NCB hot on their tail. They've just left Udaipur and they're driving through the southern, riding through the southern part of Rajasthan. And Alex is sort of overwhelmed and overcome by the brotherhood within the motorcycle club, but mostly by India itself and by the beauty that he's finding around every corner. It just doesn't matter here on the road. Nothing does. The genuine nature of being a biker flowed through him, carrying with it an inescapable sense of exemption. This must be the drug that they crave, the reason that they shun culture, civilization, and live by their own rules. Alex had tapped into the deep-rooted psyche of every biker. This is the soul of it. This is why my father left my mother. This is the justification they used to transport drugs, to kill, to do whatever needed to be done to preserve their brotherhood. And nothing could touch them, not as long as they had each other.
That's great. So before we wrap up, it's the same question I have asked the last two authors. What advice do you have for the other writers?
Buy my book.
That's the best. That's the best.
I belong to quite a few, as we all do, writing groups. And I think the most common questions I see are the things that make me cringe the most, or when I see a new writer or a fledgling writer, and they've finished my first 3 chapters. Can somebody read it and give me some feedback on it? And when it comes to a first draft, if I could tell somebody starting out on their first novel, when it comes to your first draft is simply that. It's your first draft. You're filling a bucket full of sand so that you can build a castle later. It's not supposed to be good. When you write your first draft, head down, bum up, and write it. Don't edit as you go. Don't even spell check. Don't write the first 3 chapters and ask somebody to read it. Get it done, vomit it on the page. There's lots of time to fix it later. We've all become very accustomed to seeing in the movies where the writer finishes, hits print, and out of nowhere his publisher appears and runs away with his first draft. It doesn't happen like that. There is months of work. So just focus on getting that first draft done, complete your story, fix it later.
Alright, so thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. And we had a lovely time chatting with you. So Lee's new book, Blood and Brown Sugar, is on display today. So you can check it out and purchase it from here, and also to quote Lee Nolan, buy the book. So thank you so much for all your time, and thank you.
Thank you very much. And congratulations to everyone.